Hello students, welcome to Learner's Planet. Let us continue with the chapter Control and Coordination. In the previous session, we were discussing about this process in the plants, right? And before that, as we had already studied that in animals there are two different systems for this particular process. They are hormonal system and the nervous system. But in case of plants, there is no developed nervous system for the conduction of such type of processes. Here this does not mean that control is not well maintained. Of course, it is taking place in a very organized manner, and that is possible because of the presence of various phytohormones. We can say not exactly the presence, but the secretion of different types of hormones which are controlling and coordinating all of the different functions of a particular plant. These living organisms, they shows such type of responses to a particular stimulus in the form of some movement. Now in the case of animals, movement, of course, it takes place over there also, but over there it is clearly visible, isn't it? It is immediately observed whenever such movements are taking place. Although some movements are invisible, but of course it is clearly observed that it is taking place in a immediate manner, right? Now in the case of plants, there is no such muscular system, so movement is taking place, of course, but it is in a slow and steady manner. So in the previous session we explained these types of movements, and that is what we are going to continue in this session also. So in the case of plants, they are responding to a stimulus in the form of various movements. Now this movement, as we say, it is a somewhat slow process, but we can observe it with time. Now with time we come to know that the movements can be either directional or it can be non-directional. Directional movements means that either the movement is taking place towards the direction from where the stimulus is coming, or away from the direction from where the stimulus is present. So such type of movements which are taking place in a particular direction, they are known as tropic movements or the tropism. Now generally these type of movements, that is directional or the tropic movements, they are growth dependent. Growth dependent means they can show the movement is observed because of the development of that particular part of the plant. And how the development is going to take place? Of course, it is under the influence of various kinds of hormones. Now these hormones which are secreted in the plants, they are actually directed towards a particular site due to the stimulus, and then it is affecting that area in a different manner, so that the growth is taking place in an unequal manner. And this is the reason why the direction is observed. That means the plant part is growing either towards a towards a stimulus or away from the direction of the stimulus. Now if this direction, if the part of the plant is growing towards the stimulus, then it is known as a positive tropism, and if it is away from that, then it is known as the negative tropism. Now each is under the influence of hormone, right? Now there are various other type of movements which we call as the non-directional movement. These tropic movements we have discussed already in the previous session in much details. Now these non-directional movements, they are known as the Nastic movements. Now as the name itself is suggesting, non-directional, what does it mean? That it is independent of the direction from where the stimulus is coming or where it is present. That means the entire plant is able to show this response. That means the whole part or all of the parts of the plants, most of the parts of the plants, they are affected because of the presence of the stimulus. Now second thing is that it is never so that where this particular stimulus is present, So it is not either towards or away. Steadily or slowly the entire part or the entire plant is going to be affected. Now of course this is going to depend upon the density or upon the level of the stimulus, that in how much concentration for how much time period the stimulus is actually present. So that is going to stimulate a response in the particular plant. So how much part is affected, that depends upon the extent for how much time period it is exposed to that particular stimulus. Secondly, next thing is that these particular movements, they are growth independent. Now it is growth independent means what? That the movement is, it may be because of the growth of the plant, or it may not be because of the growth. As in the case of tropic movements, essentially the movement is taking place because of the growth in that particular region of or that particular part of the plant. Here it may be because of growth or it may not be. So these type of movements, they are always growth independent, but we cannot say that every time that each time these are not showing the growth. They may show also. Now these movement, they are, of course it is not in a particular direction, so it is a non-directional, and these Nastic movements are therefore they are generally quite fast processes as compared to the tropic movements. Now in this case we can say the example could be like the mimosa plant or touch me not plant, right? So what happens in this touch me not plant? If you touches it, the leaves, they start drooping, they start shrinking. So that is something that you can observe immediately, isn't it? And if the touch is for a longer period, slowly you will see that the further part of the plant are also getting affected. So this is what we want to say, that in this case the plant movements are never directional. But of course how much plant is going to show the response, it depends upon the stimulus. Besides this, the tropic movements, they are usually permanent. Once the growth has been attained, it won't revert back. In the case of Nastic movements, if it is growth independent, then we can say the action or the movement which is shown because of the non-growth movements, in that case it is never a permanent action. As we can say in the case of mimosa plant or the touch me not plant, the leaves, they are drooping, but as soon as the touch is removed, the stimulus has been removed, then they can attain the normal shape again. So this is what the Nastic movements are having a special property. So now in today's session we are going to explain these Nastic movements. Now as we can define it, the movement of a part of a plant in response to an external stimulus, in which the direction of response is not determined by the direction of the stimulus, is known as the Nastic movement. So this is a perfect definition for these Nastic movements. Direction of stimulus is never determining the direction of response. That means all parts of the plants can be affected because of such type of movement. Now for this we must compare the Nastic movements and the tropic movement. So here is the comparison between the Nastic movement and the tropic movements. Nastic movement, as we are saying that these are non-directional, whereas the tropic movements are directional. So since these Nastic movements are not directional, so they cannot be classified depending upon this thing. Whereas the tropic movements, they are directional, and hence we can say either it is towards the stimulus or away from the stimulus, and depending upon this they are classified as positive tropic movement and the negative tropic movement. Then these Nastic movements, they may or may not be associated with the growth. They may not be linked with the growth. and if they are not linked with the growth, then it is not required, they do not require the hormones all the time, isn't it? Whereas the tropic movements, they are taking place because of the growth of the particular part of the plant. And if growth is taking place, then the hormones are having an essential role in this case. So these movements are regulated by the hormones. Now in the case of Nastic movement, if hormones are not involved, then how the process is taking place? How the movement is taking place now? So that is actually under the control of some turgor pressure, or the movement of water molecules from inside to outside or outside to inside the cells. So over there, these osmoregulatory processes or the turgor pressure, they are actually controlling the particular process. Now in the case of Nastic movements, all parts of the organs of the plants are affected generally. Now example could be like opening of the petals. If a flower is there and then the opening of petals is taking place, then you can see the entire flower is getting affected because of such movement, isn't it? But in the case of the tropic movement, the specific part is usually affected. Like we can say, if there is a growing of a stem, then what will happen? If suppose a particular region is having the accumulated hormones and it is affecting that growth pattern over there, so this growth is linked with this particular part where the hormones are actually present. The bottom part which has already grown, it is not affected now by the later growth in the region. So overall stem is it is looked as if it has increased, but the division of the cells or the growth is taking place in a particular part. So this is how we can say, although the things are observed, but internally the phenomena is limited to a particular area. So this is going to be more clear when we will study about the various examples of these Nastic movements. We had already completed the tropic movement, and over there we had observed the phototropism and the different like thigmotropism, hydrotropism and so on. Now those examples, they are clearly showing the growth of that particular part in response to the stimulus. Now another thing important is what? Stimulus is actually affecting the role of the hormones in a particular region, and therefore it is observed as a change in the pattern of growth in that area, and this is what the special feature of the tropic movement. Now in the let us now continue, or let us clear the Nastic movements with the help of several examples. So let us clarify these Nastic movements with these simple examples. This very first simple example is of the Mimosa pudica plant. What is this Mimosa pudica? Commonly known as touch me not plant. Now you must be aware of the plant or the things what we are discussing, isn't it? If there is any such plant in your surrounding and you touch the leaves or a particular part of the plant, what do you observe? You will find that these leaves, they start folding towards inside, and you can say they start shrinking and they just get drooped up towards inside, and this is what how the movement is observed. Now this movement, you can see it is observed immediately. It is a fast process, right? Which is not so in the case of tropic movements. Over there the time is taken by the plant so as to show the response. Although the reactions they are actually taking place inside, but the growth which is observed physically is taking some time. Now here the part wherever you are touching, suppose we touch over here. Now what will happen? This process will start, and this impulse will be generated so as to bring the response in the further lying parts of the plants also. Now it is never so that if you are touching at this part, then the this part is not going to droop, or it will go towards the away or towards the direction. Whether you touch at this point or any of the point, the leaves or they will start shrinking towards the inner side. That means towards the rachis or this vein or this part of the this part. I mean this vein of this particular plant. So in this case, stimulus is the touch, and since it is independent, the movement is independent of the part of the plant where the touch it has been touched, so it is known as a non-directional movement. And all the non-directional movements are known as what? The Nastic movement. Another example is the opening and closing of the petals of a flower, like dandelion flowers as shown in this particular picture. So there are many flowers which can they are responding to the intensity of sunlight, isn't it? Plants are directly exposed to the sunlight, and as the intensity of this light changes, the petals they start closing or opening in response. So in this case, as we can see, that the direction is always maintained. From wherever side the light is coming, the flowers are going to open and close in outside and inner side. The whorls will open completely or they will be partially opened. So it is not so that from which side the light is coming, so only those petals are going to open, the remaining will remain closed. That is not so. That is not happening in the case of such type of petals or the plants. So such response is known as the Nastic movement, as it is independent of the direction from where the light is coming or the stimulus is coming. In this case, the stimulus is light, isn't it? So you can see in the picture here, this picture is showing the it is actually the just a closed part of the plant or the flower, I'm sorry, as the sun rises. Okay, so the light intensity is very low at that time, and as it is actually rising, the light intensity is increasing further, isn't it? So initially in the morning it will start opening in response to a light, right? And as the sunlight is increasing, so in the average sunlight you can see the part of the flowers are partially open. The inner whorls are still somewhat closed and the remaining outer whorls are actually opened. Now as there is a maximum intensity of sunlight, the entire part or entire flowers, or I'm sorry, the petals are going to open. So you can see that how the change in the intensity of light is affecting the opening and closing of the flower, isn't it? And as it starts decreasing, as the evening time is coming, this intensity of sunlight is decreasing further, and these petals then they further again starts closing. Now such a process, it is non-directional, right? And secondly, even it is not permanent. You can see that it is changing with change in the sunlight. Now as it is opening and closing, the process is affected by several hormones also. You can see now this is something which is related to the growth of the flower. Now highest growth when it is achieved, further it is not going to link with the growth, but of course when it is going to mature, the size of the flower is not affected, but the maturity level is going to be affected. But closing and opening can be observed for a while or for a time period according to the stimulus and of course the maturity level of these flowers. Another example in which again the stimulus is light is shown in this particular picture. Now this is a picture of a moonflower. It is responding to the light, but in an opposite manner as was shown by the dandelion flowers. What is happening here is the petals are closing in the morning. That means when there is a bright light, these petals they tend to close, and when it is opening, when there is a dim light or there is a dark condition. So obviously when there are the dark conditions, it is in the night. So these flowers, they are opening at during night, and they are closing during the during the morning time, and of course they are showing a response to the light. Out of all these examples that we had studied till now, you can see that the sum of the responses are actually associated with the growth, whereas the others are independent of the growth, isn't it? You can see that, for example, the folding up of the leaves in the plant sensitive to touch is not a growth movement, whereas the opening and closing of the flowers is of course related to the growth of that particular flower. But now in this case, you can see that the growth is affecting the all of the parts of the flower, and therefore you can see the opening and closing of the petals and of the flower. Now in this case, it is very clear that these are growth independent. It may be linked with the growth or it may not be, but the tropic movements, they are essentially linked with the growth type of movements. Now growth movement is under the control of phytohormones. That is a very clear fact. But if we are saying that these may be independent of the growth, then of course phytohormones are not responsible. So what is controlling this growth independent movement here, or non-growth movement? So that is actually under the control of the water present inside the part of the plant where the stimulus is present. The level or the concentration of this water molecules is going to change further, and this is going to affect the turgidity or this nature of the part of the plant, and therefore you can see the change. Now you just imagine, if something is if object is filled enough with water, it will look some turgid, it will look some stressed, isn't it? So that is because the enough water is present. Now if this water is removed out, what will happen? It will shrink. So in the case of the mimosa plant, the same thing is happening. There is a change in the concentration of water molecules inside the leaves, due to which they are observed erect and drooped in other condition. When the water is enough inside the leaves, it appears to be erect, right? And if this water is removed from these leaves, they will shrink and they appear to be drooped in their structure. So we can clarify it more and more further. But before that, let us just have a look over certain terms which are used with in relation to these Nastic movements. Now, as early in the previous session, we had studied that there are different types of tropic movements depending upon the type of stimulus. Now, same is actually observed in the case of these Nastic movements. Let us find out what they are. So when we were studying about various examples, what basic stimulus we had followed? Like it may be touch or light and so on. So in a case when the stimulus is touch, then this type of Nastic movement is known as thigmonasty. The property or the phenomena is known as thigmonastic, and the response given or the movement would be known as thigmonastic movement. So we can simply we can define it as the non-directional movement of a part of a plant in response to the touch of an object is called as thigmonasty. So what was the example for this? The mimosa plant. The leaves, when we touch the leaves with our fingers to this sensitive plant, what will happen? The leaves, they tend to fold up and droop, right? Now we are going to explain it, or we are going to elaborate it with the help of the diagram, so that the phenomena is very clear in your mind. See, when the leaves of this particular plant, they are erect, then then it is known as a awake condition. So this first picture is showing a awake condition of the mimosa plant. Then when these are getting drooped, then they are known as they are in the asleep condition. So this diagram is showing a asleep condition of a plant. Now how is it happening? That is what we have to explain. So they are under the control of the specific muscles present in the rachis of the plant. What is this rachis? It is this particular part of the leaves, or this stem-like structure on which the leaves are actually positioned. So at this point we can say they are attached to it through a special structure known as the pulvinus. Now these pulvinus, they are attached to what? To the rachis. On either sides over these rachis, they are linked with various motor cells which are known as extensors or the flexors. Those extensors, these extensors are located at the upside of the plant, right, or these rachis. So they are known as the ventral motor cells, whereas the flexors, they are present on the dorsal side of the this structure. So these leaflets are actually they are either in the extended condition, or they are in the expanded condition, or in the drooped condition. That is because of the expansion or relaxation of these extensors and the flexors. So what is happening? Basically, when the touch or a stimulus is actually present, what basically happens here? These flexors which are present at the dorsal side, they tend to expand. Now as these cells, if they expand, what will happen? They will put a pressure over these leaflets, and this is the reason that these leaflets will move in the inward direction, and this is what we can observe during the shrinking of the leaves, and so it tends to go into the asleep condition, or the leaves, they tends to droop inside. Now as the stimulus has been removed, now what will happen? The reverse action will take place. The flexors, they tend to now relax, and the extensors, they now expand here. And as these extensors, that means the cells which are present in the ventral side, as they expand, they will put a pressure over these leaflets, and this is why they will appear, or they are observed in the erect condition. So now this condition is known as the awake condition of the mimosa plant. Now how this expansion or how this relaxation is basically taking place, as these are not under the control of the phytohormones, isn't it? So basically the level of water molecule is changing inside these cells, which is helping it to expand or to relax. So what is that? Let us now clarify that point now. So this process occurs in a following manner. See, the plant which is sensitive to touch, as we have seen, there is a pad-like swelling which is known as pulvini. Or we can say the stalk or the base of these leaves which are attaching the leaves to the rachis, they are somewhat they are actually swollen structures, and they are known as the pulvini. Now why any particular part could be this much it may be swollen? It is because it is having a lot of water in the intercellular spaces or inside the cells, isn't it? If the cell is having so much water, it appears to be more and more turgid, and this is why the pulvini, it appears to be a swollen structure. Now due to this internal water pressure, these pulvini, they are very firm, and they are able to to hold the leaves in the upright condition, and hence we can observe that these leaves are erect over there. Now what happens further? These pulvini, although they are having these enough water and these type of cells, but still they are having some intercellular spaces also. These intercellular spaces are further controlling the action now. Now what happens? As we touch the leaves, right, and if it is a sensitive part, what will happen? The water which is present here, it tends to move out from these particular cells. There is a gradient which is it is established over there. Now as the water is eliminated, what will happen? They start shrinking. These water which are released from these pulvini, they tend to enter inside the dorsal cells in the rachis, and as these dorsal cells or the flexus, they get these particular enough of water, they starts expanding. As they expands, what will happen? The bottom side, if it is getting expanded, these leaves, they will droop inside. It will exert a pressure over these pulvini so that the firmness is lost and the things appears to be in a shrink manner, or it is in the drooped manner. And of course, when the reverse happens or the touch is removed, then the reverse condition will be arised. So this is how the firmness of pulvini is basically controlling the erect or the dropped condition of the leaves. And of course, it is under the control of what? The water molecules. Water, when moves in particular direction, it is exerting a pressure over those structures, due to which firmness is gained or it is lost, and thus the swelling, or thus these movements are taking place inside the mimosa plant. So this is how it occurs in these particular plants. And in the case of the growth associated movements, the hormones are functioning over there. Those hormones are known as the phytohormones, and they are controlling the further actions shown by the plants. That's what they are. Those hormones we will continue in the next session. So go through all this material. Till then, thank you so much. So thanks a lot, and we'll meet you in the next session. Till then, goodbye.